Story 1. I've used the dark web once or twice. The scariest thing was when my screen went black for a few moments and then turned back on. It wasn't anything big, just my display cable messing up, but it did give me the creeps. As for dark or disturbing content, I've only found a list of random addresses. The dark web really has a lot of stigma associated with it. For the most part, it's just people curious about the dark web or people trying to scam you or sell you drugs. You have to do a lot of looking to find the really disturbing stuff. You're more likely to find dark web type content on Reddit or YouTube than on the actual dark web. Story 2. I once bought a bit of weed and I received a blackmail letter threatening me with awful things, like sending child pornography and calling the police if I didn't send $1 which was $1,000 at the time. I was scared, but nothing ever happened. Always check the reviews before buying anything. Story 3. A friend of mine used to use Silk Road on the darknet when Bitcoin was $10 each. He placed at least 100 orders through it and never had any issues. It's a shame he didn't keep all the Bitcoin he bought because he would have been a millionaire now. Story 4. In college, some friends and I ordered a 100 sheet of acid using Bitcoin to our college post office boxes. We got pretty terrified when it didn't arrive when it should have. We thought it was found by the United States Postal Service, our own mail service, or the Drug Enforcement Administration. We were paranoid. Turns out they just shipped it later than they said. We got our 100 tabs, but that was a very stressful week and a half for all of us. Story 5. Every time, remember that the person you just bought drugs from knows 1. Your address, that you have drugs in your house. There is probably evidence of dark web use in your finances, computer, or trash. They can report you with impunity just because they're feeling malevolent. They could also get caught and be careless with destroying former customer information, so it hangs over my head to this day. Story 6. I don't know if it was the dark web, but I accidentally came across a website that was basically just a site for gore. I saw a couple of seconds of a man with his hands already chopped off getting his face peeled off by some sort of cartel and quickly left. I had to take a break from the internet for a couple of days. Story 7. Came across a channel-style site. Every post was about trains. I wouldn't say I felt in danger, but I felt so out of the loop that I was missing something, so I just got off. Story 8. My friends and I were once ordering some green off the dark web. On the way, we saw a dude selling cyanide. Don't ask me how I got it. Don't tell me what you'll use it for. Violation of either condition will void the sale. Story 9. Had a buddy who used to order weed. The distributor got busted, and the postal service let him know there was a suspicious package for him. He could either pick it up or it would be destroyed. Story 10. I own a fairly rare car that had a rare error code. I looked it up on Google, and there was only one other person on the car maker's forum who had the same error. This guy took months and months going back and forth between car shops and the forum thread to try to get the issue fixed. Everyone on the forum was pitching in to try to help him. I kept going through this long forum thread to try to figure out if he ever fixed it. Suddenly, there were no more replies from the guy. Everyone was scratching their heads for a while. We thought he might have gotten the issue fixed and didn't bother to update us. Then one day, a news article popped up about a really rich guy who died in a Thai jail cell. We connected the two stories and they matched up. The make and model of the car in the news article matched his car, and both claimed to be in Thailand at the time. It turned out that the same guy still talking on the forums was raided by the Thai police around the time he stopped replying to the forum. He was running one of the biggest dark web marketplaces where drugs were sold and exchanged. It had something like $1 million in revenue per day, and he was hiding out in Thailand while living in luxury. They found him dead in his jail cell a few days later, claiming he died of suicide. Story 11. Everything feels government-owned. I used to frequent drug sites. They would go down for weeks at a time, then pop up again with strange prices. Sellers were different. It made the dark web feel like a labyrinth more than a lawless wasteland. Story 12. I was a casual user of the dark web for a while and got pretty involved in it, starting to buy slightly bulky packages of drugs. If you knew the markets for a while, then you would know one called Alphabi was the best of the best. The Amazon of drugs and fraud would be its best description. However, it went down mysteriously one day, and everyone assumed the owners just scammed everyone for their Bitcoin, partially true. But in the background, it was actually seized by the Drug Enforcement Administration. Everyone flocked to a new site called Hansa, which had some sketchy design features, but it was the next best alternative. It turns out the Dutch police took over the site and, with the cooperation of multiple governments, ran a drug distribution site with over $1 million in transactions for around a month. They were gathering information from unsuspecting users, including me, who bought with faulty security practices. This is where I started freaking out. Imagine trafficking drugs through the mail, and the Attorney General at the time, Jeff Sessions, makes a speech live on television that he was going to crack down and explicitly explains how troubled everyone on Hansa was because they had been gathering data for over a month. In a bold move, they closed the site and put up a banner in its place saying everyone who had purchased would be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law during his live speech. I was panicking for a month as many arrests did occur, but luckily, I guess I wasn't important enough and nothing happened to me. Story 13. Be safe, boys and girls. Do not give out your information or communicate with others. If you plan on purchasing anything, use a secure Linux operating system like Tails, use private keys, connect to a public Wi-Fi spot, not your house. Encrypt all messages, use multi-signature markets so your chances of losing your Bitcoin lessen, use escrow preferably, never send your Bitcoins from a wallet attached to you directly to the seller, and tumble your coins first. When the package arrives, do not open it for a few days. A friend of mine gave me all this information and told me I should help you guys out. Story 14. Not the modern dark web, but back in the days of Usenet, I posted some harsh criticism in alt.religion.scientology. The online threats were funny, but when I started getting death threats by mail, I backed off. I didn't think this would blow up like it did. But to answer a few common questions, I posted a bunch of criticism of the Church of Scientology in the Usenet group alt.religion.scientology. This was in the late 90s and well before most modern forums and content aggregators like Reddit existed. Fark was the big one, and Dig was just starting to get popular. I was in high school, for non-Americans, grades 9 to 12. I was using my home computer as a file transfer protocol server for a Whereas group on Internet Relay Chat, because I convinced my dad to sign up for a 90-day free trial of this new thing called broadband. I had 3 megabits per second down and 1.5 megabits per second up. Of course, we never canceled it. They figured out who I was by using a cute FTP vulnerability to get root directory access to my PC. The death threats were bad enough, but what really sticks with me is the malice of deleting my family photos, including the last picture of us with my dad while he was alive. I was the typical invincible-feeling young adult, and I was more concerned about worrying my mom than I was about my own safety. This was long before doxing was a thing, and online threats going from email to handwritten letters was terrifying, but as a high school kid, I never would have admitted it. Nobody asked, but if I was confronted in person, I would have fought back. 18 years later, if they really held a grudge and threatened me again with the same malice expressed in those letters I got, I would open the door with a gun in hand, and if they tried to get in, I would assume that they were intending to kill me and shoot first. This is a serious post, so as funny as it would be to accept the previous statement with the autocomplete error shoot first, I fixed it. Story 15. There's hitmen, human trafficking, and snuff films, but the majority of these sites are scams asking you to send them Bitcoin. A small portion of users on the dark web are there for this sort of stuff. However, buying drugs online is quite popular and widespread. Single vendors can have over $500,000 in lifetime sales. You use pretty good privacy to encrypt your address so only the seller of the drugs has access to your private information. If your package is seized, law enforcement has no proof you ordered it unless they seize your computer and you have that information stored on it. You can use Tails or USB to avoid this. Even if your packages get seized, you'll often get a love letter saying what they seized, and there is no follow-up after that. Story 16. The webcam turned itself on once. That was scary. I immediately unplugged it and my network cable and ran 3 complete scans of my system for malware and viruses. I found nothing. It hasn't happened since. Story 17. I've never personally felt I was in actual danger, so to speak, since I take proper precautions. However, early on, I did accidentally come across a site or forum while exploring that was filled with photographs of women who had been assaulted and then knocked out or killed. I shut down my browser pretty quickly after that, but I felt uneasy for a long time afterward. Story 18. I actually learned how to access the dark web by listening to National Public Radio. They had a segment where an author who was writing a book about it basically gave step-by-step instructions on how to do it. I did everything he said, and by golly, it worked. Truthfully, it was pretty underwhelming. Mostly just drugs and counterfeit items like passports and money. I did find some weapons with the serial numbers scratched off, such as pistols and shotguns, but nothing that would start World War III. I also saw a couple of ads for hitmen, but they seemed pretty hokey and were most likely undercover cops. I never felt in danger, but I have never gone back because there's nothing I really want from there. No government agents have kicked down my door either. Story 19. The scariest moment for me was when I stumbled upon a creepy alternate reality game and thought it was something much more sinister, until I found out it was just an alternate reality game. The dark web isn't really that scary. It has been romanticized and exaggerated by creepypastas, TV shows, and so on. Edit. I know stuff like the Red Room and child pornography exist on the dark web. It's just that it is not that common. Most are scams or require membership. The common user won't find much, but you will find something really off-putting if you dig enough. Story 20. Not dark web, but I used to work for a disabled guy. He had been pretty badly disabled for 20 years and spent most of his time gaming and watching films. He was there early on when torrenting and file sharing started. He even said that he had topped some lists of most prolific downloaders worldwide in the early days. Could be bragging, I don't know. He told me he had only ever had any issues once. He downloaded a film for his kids, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. He was in the habit of checking every film before he let his kids watch, but didn't this time. Just hit play. He looked up at the screen after a minute or so to see a Snow White-themed child porn video playing, 1 woman, 7 kids, etc. He didn't go into details or say how much his kids saw, just that he freaked out, exited the file, and then went to the bathroom to throw up. Story 21. You don't just stumble onto the scary parts of the dark web. You have to be looking for something sinister if you happen to come across one of the sites. Even then, getting access to these sites isn't easy, as most of them are invite-based. Most of it is just the normal internet with questionable forums, think 4chan but slightly worse, and petty drugs. It's very hard to reach the criminal parts of the dark web unless you have very specific URLs, and even then, the host has the option to deny you access. However, once you're in, it can become a slippery slope. Story 22. The idea that the dark web is an extremely shocking and dangerous place is largely inaccurate. It is mostly weird libertarian blogs and very sterile Amazon-type websites for drugs, complete with reviews of different vendors. Story 23. So I had ordered many times on the dark web, but one day I decided to place a rather large order of ecstasy pills from Europe to the United States. I had a terrible feeling in my gut after the order was placed and actually had some serious food poisoning or something that night. Cut to weeks later, I ended up getting arrested for the pills and entered the worst time of my entire life. Story 24. Not really a dark web user, but I got doxxed by a neo-Nazi group on the dark web and ended up having to use the dark web to find the websites that had my information. Department of Homeland Security and the Federal Bureau of Investigation showed up on my doorstep because they were threatening to send me letter bombs and send people to abduct and assault me. It was scary stuff. They all disappeared recently, so I'm just hoping the federal agents got to them. I elaborated more in the comments. Feel free to ask questions, but I might not give too much more information out. I don't want to be identified by anyone who's come across my docs or is associated with the group who did this in the first place. Thanks for 4,800 upvotes. Never gotten that many before. I hope everyone who saw this took it as a reminder to not mess with people and be mindful online. Scary world out there. Scary stuff. Story 25. Religious Silk Road and CGMC user here. I used to get the stuff delivered to my dorm, but the package didn't come directly to my room. I had to go pick it up from my dorm building's office. For my 3rd or 4th order from Silk Road, I got an email saying that a package had arrived for me, but when I went to pick it up, I was told by a resident advisor that my package was in the Department of Residence office. I got freaked out. I also, for some reason, was getting a lot of spam calls, which just added to my anxiety. I was scared. I didn't go to pick it up for about 4 days and kept getting emails from the Department of Residence office to come get my package. I didn't go because I thought it was a setup. But after a couple of days, I decided it was fine and went to pick up my package. I had paid a lot of Bitcoin for that order and wanted to consume what I had ordered. When I got there, I realized I was freaking out for no reason. The people holding on to my order couldn't have been nicer. They couldn't give me a reason why that package was delivered there and not to my dorm. So I just kept ordering more. Edit. The package was always delivered by United States Postal Service Priority, which is run by the federal government, and I went to a state university. So technically, the federal government transported funny stuff to the state government for me.